Hello, everyone. Welcome to our live stream today with Jeremy Enns. I'm super excited for our conversation because we've been getting a ton of questions about podcasts and podcast marketing. And it's the hot new thing as a way to market your business and build a ton of trust with your potential customers and clients. Now, for those of you who are joining in for the replay of this, go ahead and type the word replay in the chat. I'd love to circle back to y'all and give you some love as well. And hopefully we'll get some live participants as well. Now, a little bit of a shout out to our sponsor today. Our live streams are sponsored by Restream. So if you want to try it out for yourself, this is the way that I stream live to YouTube, to Facebook, and even on LinkedIn now. You can learn all about how I live stream and get the link to Restream tool by going to onlinedrea.com/live stream. And it's kind of like my approach to doing all of the things without having to feel like you're doing all of the things. Now, I'm super excited for our guest today, Jeremy, because this is a hot topic. Jeremy, we get this question a lot in the programs and the things that we do. So I want to start off with just an introduction. Can you tell us who you are and how you got into this world of podcasting?
Yeah, so my name is Jeremy Enns, and I'm super excited to be chatting with you today, Andrea, and everybody else who's watching. Please let me know in the comments if there are questions or anything like that comes up, and we'll definitely want to make sure to get to those. So I was looking at my calendar, and last year, after looking at it up every year, I finally set a calendar reminder, and this past Sunday was the 5-year anniversary of getting my first podcasting client. So a big win there, a big milestone. I haven't done anything yet to celebrate, so I should probably get around to that. Kind of, I looked Saturday and was like, oh, tomorrow's the anniversary. But yes, I've been working in podcasting for the past 5 years. I have a agency that started out as a freelancer myself. Now have a team of 12, and I run an agency called Counterweight Creative, where we help business owners launch and market and grow their podcasts. And so basically, I came into it from the technical side of things. I went to audio engineering school, so was a super sound nerd, and I mean, I still am to some extent. But over the years, one of the things I realized was that, we were helping our clients produce great sounding shows. The content was great, and still some of those people were doing really well with their shows, and the other half, it was almost 50-50, were really struggling, even though the content was great, even though the sound was great. And I started getting curious about, like, okay, what's going on here? Why are these shows doing well? These shows aren't. And so I started interviewing my clients and just researching, really diving in depth of looking at, like, what are the top podcasters out there doing, whether they've been growing shows for a while, or maybe it's shows that even just started out, 6 months, a year, 2 years ago, but have already surpassed shows that have been going for 5 years. And so kind of realized that it was all these marketing techniques. It was a different approach to marketing that the shows that were growing were doing than the ones who were kind of stagnating and kind of flatlining, which I know so many podcasters struggle with this, where maybe you get some traction like right off the bat when you launch your show, and maybe you're like 6 months in, a year in, 2 years in, and you just still are just growing really slowly. And so I would just say that that's probably where the vast majority of podcasters are. So, like, don't feel like it's just you, but there are ways to kind of get around that and kickstart growth, which is, I think, what we're going to talk about a lot today.
Yes, absolutely. And it's one of those things where podcasting is a simple concept, but in order to execute it, in order to actually like put action into that plan, just a few missteps and it could just be a make work project.
Oh, yeah.
So in thinking about this, starting from the beginning, as we're planning our podcast strategy, I know a lot of people either just starting or are planning their podcast strategies. Where do we start when we're thinking about the podcast itself, but also using it as a vehicle to grow our business?
Yeah. So I think where the first thing that is really essential to understand when it comes to starting a podcast, or whether you've been creating this, probably if you are results that you're wanting, this is probably the thing, the source of that is that if you look back, let's say, and even maybe a little bit more recently than that, but certainly like 5 years and earlier, you could just show up, produce a great sounding show, and if the quality was good of the content as well, like you were going to grow an audience naturally. And a lot of people have found that out with platforms like Clubhouse right now. Like you get in early and you are consistent with it, and you can just naturally grow an audience, and you don't need to work that hard at it. And so, of course, you can like jump from platform to platform to platform as each new one comes along, but it's still not guaranteed that that's going to work for you necessarily. And there are still a lot of benefits to starting a podcast. And so the thing that you need to understand is like 5 years ago, that worked in podcasting. Podcasting was the Clubhouse of its day, kind of where there was a gold rush and people were just like showing up, creating content, building audiences, tens of thousands of listeners. I know a lot of people who got in at that stage and pretty easily grew shows. That it just doesn't work that way anymore. And so back then, I know you mentioned, Andrea, that the element of trust, which is such a huge part of podcasting. And I can't think of another platform that really builds trust the same way that podcasting does. It's such an intimate medium. But back then, podcasting was also a great discovery and exposure tool. Like you were naturally going to have people come across your show. And so I think a lot of people who come to work with us, they are looking to start podcasts as a way to get exposure. Like this is going to be the way that they grow their audience. And I think the big reframe that all of us in the podcasting space need to understand and go through is that podcasting is not really a great exposure tool anymore. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. That was just, an early phase in podcasting's, as a platform, that it was a good discovery tool and exposure tool. Today, it's still a fantastic trust building tool, but we need to actually look at other ways to get that exposure to bring people back to our shows. And so I think that's, if there's one thing that I just like harp on again and again and again, is that just producing content, and this is something that you talk about, I know, all the time, Andrea, with any social media platform, producing content is not how you grow your audience. That's how you nurture and build the relationship with your existing audience. But you need to do other things, find other ways of engaging with outside audiences who aren't yet familiar with you, and getting exposure to them to pull them back to your own kind of owned media.
Yes. It's almost like podcasting and social media to some extent has become more of that middle of the funnel type of marketing activity where it is that trust building. And I have people come to me all the time who say, I found your podcast, I listened to like 50 episodes, and then I, want to work with you or join a program or something like that. So I know that it's working. And we can talk a little bit about like how to know if that's working as well for other people. Yeah. But for me, I do know it is that trust building piece that is so valuable. So when we're thinking about, so if our podcasts are the middle of the funnel and we're thinking about leveraging that piece, what are some things we should have in place to nurture people to make sure they do take a next step to work with us in our business or sign up for our programs or whatever the case may be?
Yeah. So I think this all comes down to, like, when we talk about marketing, when I think about marketing, I think this may differ from what a lot of people think of initially. I think in most people's minds, marketing is about exposure and attention, and like that's the extent of it. And I think that for me, it all has to come back down to the product first. That like without that foundational element of the product or service or whatever it is, like all of that other stuff doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much attention or exposure you get if you don't have a solid product that is going to kind of keep people engaged and get them, a win for out of engaging with you. And so for me, it all starts with that base, which is the content itself. And of course, if you're going to be nurturing people, like that's our goal as business owners, as creators, as marketers, is people going to want to take the next step, and we've proven that we can get them a win at whatever level they're already at. So when I think about like social media as it relates to podcasting and maybe like moving down from the top of the funnel, it's like, okay, if I can get you a win with 30 seconds of your time, they're going to be like, oh, well, I wonder what they can do with, 15 minutes of my time or an hour of my time on the podcast. And so you kind of build up those small wins over time. They then move down the middle of the funnel and they start listening to a bunch of podcast episodes, and they keep building momentum. If you can keep giving them those wins through your content, they're going to be like, oh, well, okay, I've got all this value out of this free content. Like, what would it do if I was to actually pay for their offers and services? So I think like that's the whole goal of at every stage, like how can you just kind of keep getting people little wins or big wins, whatever that is. And so when it comes to that, I mean, that's all about probably, not probably, I know this is something you talk about, but just like being crystal clear on who that audience is, you're best positioned to help them. And, that same content is going to be through going through social media, through your podcast, through newsletter posts, like anything you do, for that to work, you need to know who you're speaking to and how you can actually best help them. And I know that this is something that probably people have heard harped on again and again and again, and there's a reason for it. And I know, because I've been there, that we all ignore it and we don't do it. We don't get clear on who we're speaking to. We don't talk with them. We don't build up like a list based on our interaction with them of like, okay, here's all these things that they said to me. I should probably just address these things and I'll be good to go. But I think that's really foundational to starting a podcast that is going to get results and help nurture people to the next step.
Yes. Oh, yeah, absolutely. So for those of you just joining in, we're talking about podcast marketing. We're talking about the value of having a really clear understanding of who your podcast is for and giving them those quick wins so that they can get that trust built up with you and take that next step towards working with you. So if you have any podcast marketing questions, definitely pop them in the chat. We're going to open this up for Q&A in a moment. But I want to talk about tracking all of this next. So podcasting is notorious for having like some of the worst tracking, like conversion tracking as a marketing tool. And I'm saying this from a place of love because I love my podcast. We're going on, I think we're going to be celebrating our 3rd year here soon of the show. It's been a great tool for marketing the business, but I can kind of see how many people are downloading. And in some apps like Apple Podcasts, I can see a general sense of how many minutes people listen. That's about it. So how can we really start tracking our podcast success? How do we know if this podcast marketing plan is successful?
Yeah, so there are the exciting thing. You're right that this has been a huge problem. I mean, it's a blessing and a curse with podcasting is that nobody owns it. There's no, Facebook doesn't own podcasting, Apple doesn't own podcasting, and so it's still very open. And that is, people like Spotify are trying to close that off, and many companies are, and trying to take ownership of it, which is kind of bad for us as creators. It's good for other interests in some cases, but it has also caused problems for us creators, the open nature, in that there is no centralized hub of like YouTube has all this data that you can see like when people are dropping off and all of that, because they just control the whole ecosystem. And so until now, yes, typically you can see, just downloads, which could mean somebody listened through the full episode, or they click play, listen to a second and didn't listen to anymore, which, you kind of just have to read into that what you will. Like you mentioned, though, there are platforms like Apple Podcasts and Spotify and Google Podcasts that are now having their own advanced analytics. And it's a bit annoying in that you have to go into each of their individual dashboards to see those stats. But there are actually tools. The one that I use most regularly is called Chartable. And you can basically just integrate each of those platforms into your Chartable dash them up, and you can see all that kind of aggregate data there. And so it's still not, it'll show like, here's your Apple, here's your Spotify stats, here's your Google stats, but at least you can see it all on one page. And so this is a huge, it's a huge kind of problem for the industry as it kind of matures. And so there's a lot of concerted effort into solving this problem, and a lot of like tech companies and startups that are looking to bring more solutions like this. So I would imagine within the next year or two, things are going to continue to change very rapidly, and there's going to be more and more tools for us as creators to be able to track that. And obviously, like as with other platforms, the better able we and sponsors and advertisers are able to see that those kind of stats and data, the more money is going to continue to flow in, and which hopefully should continue to benefit us as well as a lot of the sponsors who are out there and advertisers as they kind of inject more money into the ecosystem.
Yes, I love that. I think it's going to be the new way of consuming media, really. And I want to share this tool with everybody. I'm going to try to share my screen here and see if I can pull up Chartable because I find it fascinating. Yes, neat. Okay, so I'm looking at Chartable. You can actually search for your podcast. I'm going to search for the Savvy Social Podcast and just show y'all what this looks like. If it goes... I think I have too many tabs open. Does anyone else have this problem? There we go. Okay, Savvy Social Podcast. And the neat thing about Chartable that I like is it actually also shows your podcast ranking, and it gives you a little bit of a sense of, how the show is performing compared to other shows as well. So looking at the Savvy Social Podcast, we have been in the top. Oh, look, we dropped a little bit yesterday, but we're in the top 100 marketing for Canada, Australia, the UK, in the marketing category. So it's business, then marketing, and you can actually take a look at your rank history and see all of that. You can see your reviews as well, which I do find challenging for, like, especially if you just look at Apple Podcasts, and if you're in Canada, you'll only see the Canadian reviews. So this shows you all of that. And so this could be really helpful just to give you a sense of your overall insights from a public perspective. And you can see this no matter for any podcast. So if you're looking at other podcasts as well, you can see this data, which I find fascinating. Or maybe I'm just a data nerd.
You're in good company.
Yeah, so definitely check it out. It's chartable.com. Chartable.com.
And there are they have a ton of tools that are great. You can basically do campaigns with UTM codes for your different episodes. So you can kind of see like, okay, I'm going to post this to Instagram, and I'm going to create one link for Facebook, and I'm going to create one link for LinkedIn or something like that. And you can kind of see where those clicks are coming from. And then you can also create what they call smart links. And this may actually be integrated with that, what I was just talking about there, the kind of campaigns. But these smart links, basically you have one link that will open up a landing page. So when somebody clicks on it, then they'll have whatever podcast apps are detected on their device. They'll have an option to listen right in there, which has been another one of these problems where there are so many different apps out there that people listen on. Not everybody listens on Apple Podcasts. So should you share the Apple Podcast link to your latest episode or to your website? Your website usually isn't like listen friendly. Somebody would rather listen on their actual app. And so that Chartable Smart Link, you can just have one link and click that, and wherever anybody listens, they'll be able to click right to their app on that.
Yeah, make it easy for them. Why not? Okay, so we've got a question from the audience, which we'll get to in a moment, but I do want to encourage those of you participating now, ask your questions. This is your Ask Me Anything chance to ask podcast experts some marketing questions about how to launch and grow your shows. So definitely put that in the chat, and we will get to those questions in a moment. But I want to talk about your program, because the way that you craft your information, first of all, is just beautiful. I think the way that you deliver content is great, from one content creator to another, from one course creator to another. I admire it, and just how you put together programs. But I feel like there's a lot of people talking about the technical side of, how to produce a show, but you're actually helping people grow their show and market it and actually make it something viable and profitable for their business. So can you talk to us a little bit about the podcast marketing program that you have?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, thank you for that. I have a ton of respect for everything that you do, and I know we've known each other for a few years, and I've just always really admired how you go about creating content as well. So that really does mean a lot to me. For the program, basically, this came out of that curiosity that I had for my clients. And so for me, it was, as a business owner, working with clients, and obviously, people who are getting results are going to keep working with you, and people who are not, they might not keep working with us, or they might just quit their shows entirely. And this was something that we were having this like kind of churn with clients who, they started their shows. It's not cheap to produce a show at a high level, and it also takes a ton of time. And so when they got stuck in the early years, a lot of them would just, they produce their show for a year and then drop off. And so basically it all started from this kind of like desire to help my clients get better results, so that, we would be able to keep working with them and keep them in our ecosystem as well. And so I started interviewing all these clients and seeing, what was working, what were they trying, and a lot of the same kind of things kept coming up. And so what I realized with almost everybody who has come into the academy so far and gone through it, as well as a lot of the clients who are struggling to gain traction, when I ask them, okay, what are you doing to market your podcast right now? almost every single person said the exact same thing to me. They said, well, every time an episode comes out, I send it out to my email list and I post about it on social media, on all the social channels. And then I was like, yep. And they're like, yep, that's it. And I thought,
anything else?
Interesting. And so basically how I think about this, like this is again, like how we think about marketing. I think there's a disconnect, and especially if you're coming in as a creative. I know I have gone through this and come out the other side, but there's this kind of sleazy feeling to marketing. It doesn't quite feel like something we want to be doing. And I've heard some stats recently that I think it's less than 10% of consumers trust that marketers have their best interests at heart. And so I think we all have that feeling that when marketing is happening, it's like taking advantage of us. And so I just want to say, as we're like talking about the program, I teach marketing. To me, what I teach, like how I teach marketing, how I think about marketing, is that marketing is about connection. And like that's all it is. All we're trying to do with our marketing is connect with people. And I think for me, when I kind of had that reframe, I was like, oh, I can do that. Like, that sounds fun. That sounds like something that is going to make me feel good and is going to make other people feel good. And so this is kind of like the right kind of marketing. And for anybody who wants to go look up kind of like, I think this blog post really reframed it for me. It's by Seth Godin, and it's called Two Types of Marketing, or Two Kinds of Marketing, something like that. And it's a short blog post, and it will like hopefully like completely change the way you look at marketing as well. So that's a great place to start, and it's something that I refer to in the Marketing Academy. So basically, yeah, when we're talking about marketing here, it's all about connection. And so going beyond just promoting, which is what I think a lot of like social media, pushing it on social media, that's like promotion, kind of driving people to a specific, making an ask of them, trying to get them back to the podcast episode, and looking for other ways of like not even trying to make that ask to get them to listen to the episode immediately, but just connect with them on a human to human level. And there are a whole bunch of ways that we can do that once we know who we're trying to reach. And so that might be, looking at guesting on other podcasts, or doing collaborations and Q&As like Andrea are doing right now, or collaborating with other creators. This is a huge one. You look at any medium out there, this is always a great way that people grow their audiences. It happens on YouTube all the time. It happens on Instagram with Instagram takeovers, guest blogging, and like cross-promotional blogging. I've seen it done with newsletters, podcasts. Like, if you can partner with other creators and find a way to grow together, like that is a surefire way to like have that rising tide raise all ships. And this is something we talk about quite a bit in the Academy as well. And so I think for me, like that's really what the type of marketing that I teach is about connection. And that's kind of like the exposure side of things. We spend a lot of time, actually like 3/4 of the time in the Academy is not about the exposure, but more about the foundation and about how to first build a show that's actually worth talking about. Because I know for me, like when I look at the shows that I listen to, I think it was something I looked at my 20 top shows, and I think it was like 16 or 17 of them somebody told me about. Like that is still the biggest way that people discover podcasts. And I've talked to a lot of people, and that holds true for most of them. And so I think for people to spread the word about the show, it has to be good enough in the first place. And so a large part of the Academy is about, while it's not necessarily about like the technical audio side of things, it's about the content and the audience development and nurturing, and like how can we create something that people are actually like can't help themselves but tell their friends about.
Yes. I mean, honestly, okay, I'm totally biased here because I met my husband on YouTube doing a collaboration. So I'm going to preach the collaboration game forever because it is a really impactful way to build community and connection and to find your people. But also when it comes to podcasting, sometimes we throw our content out into the void and hope that people hear it. It's kind of like that old saying, if a tree falls in the woods and no one's around, do you hear it? Whatever the phrase is. And so it is like that with podcasting sometimes. So I love that you start with the foundation of creating a great show. And then from there, you move into actually getting attention on that show. So if y'all want to join the wait list for learning how to unlock this beautiful podcast marketing medley of things, go to my special link, onlinedrea.com/podcast marketing, and sign up for the wait list. You will get notified when the program is live and available. There's also a few other things that Jeremy's doing in the meantime. He also has this like amazing masterclass if you're looking for how to get sponsorships. That's coming up soon. But I believe if you sign up for the waitlist, you'll get access to all of that, right, Jeremy?
Yeah. Yeah,
awesome.
and you can actually, if you sign up to that, you'll have links back to all my stuff, and you can just look me up as well. And all the links to the sponsorship masterclass are out there for sure.
Yay. Awesome. I know we get that question a lot as well. Like, where do I find sponsors? How do I convince them to give me money? So I think that class will be helpful for people. Yeah. Awesome. All right. So we've got some questions here in the chat. Please ask more questions in the chat so we can make sure to get your questions answered. We'll hang out with y'all here for another couple of minutes answering these questions. Okay. First question came from the Facebook group, so this person's info is private. But would it be more beneficial to have micro episodes as opposed to long episodes once a week? Could that work better for certain audiences? And again, this question came from our community at the Savvy Social School.
So I would say it could. I think that this is one of those questions that comes up time and time again, and it's one of those unfortunate questions where there is no right answer. And so depending on your audience, I know we've in the past have worked with a number of shows that were aimed at moms. And so a lot of times for them, it was like, okay, I know my audience has typically this long a commute from home to dropping the kids off at school and back. And so we've talked to our audience, and we know that they want to be able to finish an episode in that like 25 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever that is. And that's probably not a micro episode. But I think that taking into consideration who your audience is and what they want out of you is part of that. But there's also this whole positioning angle. And this is, again, something that we talk about quite in depth in the Marketing Academy is how are you positioning your show against other shows out there? And this is something that I think to me over the past 6 months to a year has just become something of an obsession that I just think is so important and that nobody really thinks about when they're starting their show. But this is really one of those things at the core of differentiating yourself as a podcast. There's over 1 million podcasts out there now. And so differentiation has become something that we all really, really need to think about. If there are 10 shows talking about the same thing in our niche, like what makes us any different from those other than us? And hopefully we do bring a unique perspective and a unique style. But if somebody looks at our show, or if you tell somebody about your show in 1 to 2 sentences, is it clear that your show is drastically different than the others out there? And so, playing with length is one of those things that is going to be a very clear differentiator. If most of the shows are 45 minutes in your niche, talking about that same topic, that's probably a great place to go. If you can deliver high quality content in 5 minutes, like that is going to set your show apart and massively differentiate you from all the other ones. Or maybe you do 2-hour episodes instead. There's you could go to either extreme and go way more in depth. And so thinking about that length from that perspective is, I think, one of the things that is going to be helpful when you're thinking about that. So I would say it could work really well for your audience. It could work really well as a differentiator. And it also could not. Maybe you're the type of person, like for me, I'm someone who likes to get into longer, deeper talks about content. So probably I don't actually want to do a 5-minute, like that doesn't work for me as a host. And it's not like what I would have fun doing. That said, I know a lot of people have had success with doing a hybrid approach where they do the full episode and they also do a second episode a week that is super short. And sometimes those serve entirely different audiences, and maybe some people listen to both, but that you can kind of like expand your audience that way as well and offer something for everyone. So that's kind of my take on it. And with everything marketing, my go-to response is like, try it and see what happens. Like marketing is all about experimentation, and nobody knows what's going to work for in any case, for myself or for you or anything like that. You kind of got to try it and see what sticks, and then do more of what works and do less of what doesn't.
Yeah. And even the same niche, the same topic can have different results depending on the other variables that happen. And I'll even use a personal example here too. I've been studying leadership skills lately because I need to I worked so hard building the business, and now I'm like, oh, I have a team, I have to lead them. One of my favorite podcasts right now is 15 minutes long. I listen to it while I have my coffee in the morning, while I'm doing my makeup, and it's that quick 15 minutes. I'm like, oh, okay, that is actionable. It's quick. It's something that I can do. And then there's other podcast that I listen to that's like almost an hour and a half long every time. And it's like the perfect length for like driving to my dance class and back. So I always I look forward to that time because I'm like, I get to listen to this podcast. So I think you've got to really, if you have a great show, people will fit it into their lives, which falls in line with what you do and helping people create great shows. But also, I love the advice of like figure out what your ideal listener is doing in their day. When are they listening to this, and try to time it to that space.
Yeah.
Great question. Okay. Next question here. We find most of our traffic comes from IG, Instagram, where we're focusing a lot of our energy. We have joined a podcast network, and we're wondering if it's really worth it to join networks.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it can be for it's interesting because I've talked with a lot of people who start networks and they seem completely nonsensical to me. And so I think it depends. I've seen a lot of people get, I don't want to say conned into networks, but I think a lot of like small indie networks make a lot of big promises that are just, they never pan out. And so you're probably not going to get like burned as in like lose thousands of dollars or anything like that. But I think that the benefits are so often like non-existent, and it's you can like buy into the dream of it. Like one thing is going to like, put us on the map. And I think that that's just not true very often. And so I have seen some networks do really well, but I think the thing to think about is that for a network to do well, like there needs to be either everybody is kind of equals in it and is equally bought in, or there needs to be one person who's running it or one team, and that's their full-time job. They're not doing it on the side. Like their job is to make this network as good as it can be. And so I think when I see it like not work out well, it's like this side thing that somebody's like, oh yeah, we're joining together, we're going to create this network, and it just isn't anybody's primary focus. And so there's just no effort gets put into each of the individual shows from the network perspective. And you don't get any of that support. And oftentimes too, this is the ones that are really annoy me, where it's like, there's one person who started and they have their own show. And basically they're using this network to like, it's almost like a multi-level marketing thing, or like a Ponzi scheme, where it feels like they've started it to try and get more traffic for their show. And they're kind of like, oh yeah, they do a few things here and there for the other shows, but really it's about them. And so I think like before joining a network, just be really clear on what your commitment is, what they're going to do for you. I mean, contracts and all that kind of stuff are definitely worth having. And I think most importantly of all, like make sure that all of the shows are really highly aligned, that they work together and they each bring something unique, but that it's a natural kind of progression from one to the other. I stumbled across a network. What are they called? Let me just look right now. I know their logo is a bicycle, and two of the shows, I've actually listened to 3 of the shows. Okay, let's see. So the one that I liked is called Ministry of Ideas, and the other one is called The Lonely Palette. And both are very different, but they both feel aligned. And I can't see what this network is, but looking through all their shows, they do, cross promotion every episode. At the end of each show, they'll like shout out to another one of the shows on their network. And every time I hear one, I'm like, oh, that sounds really interesting. I think I would like that. And so like, that's a well done network where each of them like promotes the others. And for any one of them, there's a good chance that the average listener of one show is going to like any or all of the other ones. And so like that kind of alignment is really important if you're going to be joining a network.
I mean, it sounds like everything has this running thread of like, make sure that things are aligned. If it's not lined up properly, it doesn't matter if it's the best podcasting network out there. If your show doesn't fit into their suite of offers, it could not be a good fit just all around. Love that. Yeah. Okay, next question. Definitely ask your questions in the comments so that we can get your questions answered. This person says yes to collabs, but if you host a non-interview show, is it harder to collaborate with others?
So I would say not necessarily. Actually, I would say not at all. I think there are certain types of collabs, like if you're doing like a guest trade, something like that. That's not going to be open to you if you don't actually do interviews. But I mean, I have done many, many, many guest interviews on other shows where I had a show to reciprocate to have them on at the time, and sometimes I have had a show to have them back on at the time. But so you like podcast guesting, that kind of falls under the collaboration umbrella, but is also different. One of the things that I like to do, or one of the easiest wins for collaborations, and there's a lot of stuff that you can do with podcasting that gets a little bit more advanced, but it's just to record basically an ad, and except that you're not paying each other to run the ads, but you're just promoting each other's shows. And so if I have a show and Andrea has a show, she's going to give me some copy kind of, or maybe I'll write it myself, and I'm going to run, a 30-second or 1 minute long ad saying like, hey, if you love this show, I have another show recommendation that I know you're going to love. My friend Andrea has this fantastic podcast called the Savvy Social Podcast, and where she talks all about these things here. And I know if you listen to this show, we don't talk about that a lot, but it's also relevant to you. And so go check that out, and let me know what you think. Start with this episode, or something along those lines. And then she's going to do kind of reciprocate and do that for me. And this is something that we've seen clients who've pretty much doubled their audience almost overnight after running, 2 or 3 weeks of ads or promo swaps like this with another like highly aligned audience. And so again, this is where it goes back to like, who is that audience that you're speaking to, and then what else matters to them that you don't really talk about on your show. And that is where that great kind of cross-pollination can happen, where both audiences win and both podcasters win. And that's with any kind of, with sponsors, with other cross promotions with other podcasters, with anything where you're like bringing in other parties. Like, it's got to be the win-win-win, or in this case, win-win-win-win, both audiences and both hosts.
I like that. I haven't tried that before. It's definitely something that's on my mind. And another thing that I've been thinking about that I keep hearing whispers about is using Spotify ads, because you can target other podcasts for people who have the free Spotify accounts. Have you played around with that at all? Or
I've not yet, but that's something that I am looking into. Yeah, when it comes to advertising, I think that's much more in my line of advertising than like Facebook and Instagram ads for podcasts. Don't bother with them. I would say I feel like it's too hard to get people off of those platforms and into a podcast. And so for me, I would always look at like advertising on other podcasts, or in like industry newsletters or something like that, or niche newsletters. If you know somebody who runs a great newsletter in your niche, a lot of times they do take sponsorships. That's something that it feels like a bit more of like an old school advertising tactic. We've all moved to all this like highly trackable, like Facebook, Google, Instagram, but still old school, like newsletter, actual just like websites. That's not a Google ad, but reaching out to the website owner themselves. Those are types of kind of advertising that I think works better for podcasters a lot of times.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. I love to pick the brains of other people in the industry. This whole live stream is just basically an excuse to do that. Okay. Last question here is about sponsorship. From the sponsor brand perspective, will you talk about how brands can find podcasts they might want to work with?
So I've experimented with this a little bit myself, as looking to try and find podcasts to sponsor for my own things in the past, and it has been frustrating sometimes. And so I know there are some tools. Podcorn is one that comes to mind, Podcorn, and that one is, so it's basically like a sponsor podcast marketplace where sponsors and podcasters can cut out like the ad agencies and directly connect with each other. It's frustrating as a sponsor because there are so many bad, unqualified podcasts on there that have like last episode 12 downloads. Like, that's not appealing to any sponsor. And so I think like there's kind of it's exciting for a lot of podcasters who feel like, oh, this is all I need. This was the missing piece to get sponsors. It's just this way to connect with them. But that's never just the missing piece. It's going back to this. It's not about the exposure. It's about the quality of the product first, and being a lot more targeted about that. So in the sponsorship workshop, we're talking about it from a podcaster's perspective for finding sponsors, but I think it's almost just like flipping it around, and it is very applicable from the sponsor's perspective as well. And so my kind of whole philosophy is doing more kind of manual outreach. I feel like a lot of times with any tech tool, there's a lot of big promises that come along with that. And for most people, they're not going to work that well. Like the tools don't solve the problems. It's much more about like, I don't know. We've talked about alignment a lot, and I think it's hard with marketplaces to find the right shows. They might not even be on there. So if you're a brand looking to sponsor a show, like I don't think it should be that hard probably to just do some Googling or in a podcast app and look for, shows about this and just like listening through a few of those and seeing, which ones really feel like a good fit for you. And then just doing some manual outreach to those podcasters. And I mean, as a brand, like probably almost any show you reach out to is going to like leap at the chance to be able to have a sponsor. So I think it's you're in a good position there.
Yeah. And as you were talking, I whipped up my pretty link here for the sponsorship workshop, multitasking for the win. So tell us about this, because it's really a 5-day kind of experience on how to get big sponsors that are actually really aligned with the show. So tell us about this live workshop.
Yeah, so like you mentioned, it's a 5-day workshop. There's going to be a 30-minute lecture from me each day, which is going to be at, I think, noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. This is next week coming up, March 29th through April 2nd. So there's going to be that 30-minute lecture and then 30 minutes of Q&A. And then each day is going to have a homework assignment that basically over the course of those 5 days, by doing those homework assignments, you'll have built out your pitch to one of your dream sponsors by the end of that and be ready to hit send on this. And the workshop's completely free. It's based on how I've seen a lot of our clients and how we've advised a lot of our clients to work with sponsors. And I know one of our top performing shows has he gets about 1,500 downloads per episode. So, I mean, it's a decent size show, but by no means does he have, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of downloads. And he has 2 sponsors right now, each paying $3,000 a month. And they both signed on for 12-month commitments. So he's basically got $6,000 a month in guaranteed income over the next 12 months. And they had both worked with him in the past on kind of shorter deals. And obviously they were getting results out of that and were happy to sign on for that long-term agreement. And so this is basically teaching that kind of framework of how you can find sponsors like that, who, even though you have a small show, they're going to actually be excited and they're going to get a win. You're going to get a win. And your audience is also going to have exposure to hopefully a product or a service that they already are looking for. Again, going back to this win-win-win where, everybody can feel good about it. You're not like selling out your audience to promote something that you don't believe in, and really looking at, I would say it's beyond advertising, and it's more that like true sponsorship or partnership with brands who you're both working towards the same kind of goals there and serving the same audience. So we're going to be working through that together. Like I said, it's free. All the replays, all the templates, homework assignments, everything is going to be available for life if you can't make it for the live calls. So I would love to have you join us if that's something that you're interested in.
Oh, yeah, that sounds like super valuable. And it's a question I get a lot because I have 2 sponsors for the Savvy Social podcast, and that happened on accident, y'all. I don't know how to replicate this. So go to this workshop so you can figure out how to do the same. They basically pay for the production of the show, and I'm allowed to or able to do so much more creative things. Like this year, we're putting all of the content on YouTube as well, which is a lot of time and energy for production. And so even things like that are very helpful. So definitely join us, onlinedrea.com/podcast sponsorship, all singular there. And join the workshop. You'll get a ton of value. And even if you can't go through the material now, Jeremy, you said it's a lifetime access. So even if you want to sign up now and you're not able to join live next week, you'll still have that content when you need it.
Yeah. And this is something that I know I have had so many questions about this for years and had never really, I used to think that sponsorships weren't really something that was worth it for, especially business owners to pursue, because I always thought like, well, self-sponsorships are so much better where you're promoting your own products and services and all that. And I mean, that's where we've seen most of our clients make most of their ROI from their shows. It's kind of a longer term, less direct kind of form of monetization. But like you were saying, how most of the people who come, or maybe not most of the people, but many people who do end up working with you have listened to a number of podcast episodes in the past. And so that's kind of how I think of that's where the highest upside is on in terms of podcasting driving monetization. But then I started to see more and more of our clients they're already doing that, but then they were still getting these big sponsorships. And I was like, oh, I think I need to reconsider and look at what they're doing here and how they're able to land these actually significant kind of sponsorship deals rather than the, nickel and dime kind of industry average sponsorship rates of like $20 per 1,000 downloads or something like that, which you need a lot of downloads in order for that to be worth it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Awesome. Yeah, definitely sign up for that, y'all. I will also put the link in the chats for these once this live stream is completed. We actually have one more question popping in here from LinkedIn, actually. Any advice for beginners? So let me put up here. Katija, hopefully I'm saying your name right. Wait, here's her first question. Is there any courses for podcasters for beginners? Do you offer any content along that? Or is it really for, like, who is this course really for?
Yeah, so the Marketing Academy is for people, typically, I would say, who have been podcasting probably for, maybe a minimum 6 months. I feel like most of our members are like 1, 2, even 3 years in and are kind of hit that wall and they're frustrated and they've like tried everything they can think of and aren't quite ready to give up the show, but are kind of feeling like, okay, at this point, what something's got to give. So that's where the course is really aimed. I am looking at doing a beginner's launch course later this year sometime. So that is something that's in the works. But as of right now, I don't have that, but I'm happy to answer questions or anything like that. If you connect with me or want to jump on a call or anything like that, please reach out and I'm happy to talk you through some of the options in terms of getting started.
Yes, and Jeremy's very approachable, so definitely reach out. And I feel like he actually has really good boundaries too. So if he can't help you, he'll let you know. But if he can, he'll give you tons of resources for that. Also, total side note for this too, Jeremy has a great newsletter that you can sign up for as well, and just get some overall marketing tips and approaches to growing your business and your, even as a content creator, just how do you approach this internet marketing world without being sleazy, scammy, or any of that. And it's a really really nicely done newsletter, so check that out as well. Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us today. Any final words of wisdom for those of us who are joining us live and watching the replay?
Oh boy, it's a lot of pressure. Final words. I think this is maybe I said this before, but marketing can feel like overwhelming. I think a lot of times this is what a lot of my newsletter actually relates to is being a creator and a creative can feel so overwhelming. I like to think of my newsletter as kind of like wayfinding or like signposts for living a creative life of like, we all feel like we're wandering around in the wilderness and we don't know what we're doing. And we feel like everyone else knows what they're doing. And so we're like trying to like see like, okay, well, that person's doing this, maybe I should do that. And I think that for me, one of the things that I've really kind of embodied over the past year and especially going into 2021 has been one of my goals is to kind of run my own race and ignore what other people are doing. And I think we all have a lot of like internal wisdom that we shut out a lot of times. And so I think for me, all of us could benefit from like listening a little bit more closely to, what we actually feel excited about. And if there's like some marketing tactic or something that you hear is doing really well, but you're like, I don't know if I can really do that, it's probably not going to get you results. And so I know for me, that's been one of the things this year where I'm like, okay, all these things that I procrastinate on, I don't feel good about, I never want to do them. Like, I'm just not going to do those. And I'm going to double down on the things that actually get me excited. And so I would say that if there are things like that for you, like prune the things that you don't want to be doing and double down on, the 1 or 2 things that you actually feel excited about and go with those. And you're probably going to get better results.
Yes, I say that about social media too. Like if I tell you, oh, you've got to be on this platform and you're not excited about it, you won't do it. So I think listening into kind of your own internal wisdom, your years of experience is a great piece of advice. Thank you so much, Jeremy, for joining us on this amazing live Q&A today. For those of you interested in learning more, definitely sign up for the waitlist for podcast marketing, onlinedrea.com/podcast marketing. Even if this isn't for you right now, signing up for the waitlist will be really helpful for you as you go into the future. As you kind of go, as podcasting becomes more and more popular and more people integrated into their lives and into their daily way of doing things. Thank you so much, Jeremy. And thanks everyone for joining us. We will see you on the internet. Bye.
See ya.